The fundamental imperative of all terrorist groups is to act. People don't become terrorists to sit on their hands. They become terrorists to carry out attacks. And here we come to another paradox in terrorism, in that even unsuccessful attacks that may not even succeed in destroying the target or even killing anyone can nonetheless be enormously successful to terrorists in terms of the publicity and also in terms of the fear and anxiety that even unsuccessful attacks can generate. In 1994, IRA terrorists plotted to assassinate then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher while she was at the Grand Hotel in Brighton, where the annual Conservative Party conference was being held. I mean, this would have been a key terrorist attack. They would have killed not only a serving prime minister, but the entirety of the party's hierarchy, which was at the time the government ruling Britain. Months before the convention, they hid in a library of the Grand Hotel a bomb very crudely powered by a computer microchip. In fact, the microchip was taken from what was very common then, a video cassette recorder. So for months the bomb had been set there. It went off, it exploded, did not kill Prime Minister Thatcher. Tragically, several members of her cabinet were seriously injured. At least 2 persons were killed. The conference wasn't even disrupted. The following morning, in an act of defiance against the terrorists, Prime Minister Thatcher delivered a blistering speech condemning terrorism, condemning the violence. But nonetheless, the front page headlines that morning was not Prime Minister Thatcher's stoicism, was not the fact that the bomb didn't go off, but the fact that the IRA nearly killed a serving Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And this also gave the IRA to utter, I think, one of the most famous aphorisms in terrorism, where they said to Prime Minister Thatcher, "You have to be lucky all the time. We only have to be lucky once." And it's that playing of the odds that also drives terrorists to try and try and try again and hope that eventually they'll be successful. 2 other brief examples. At the height of the 1991 Gulf War, when US and British and other allied forces were fighting in Kuwait to dislodge Saddam Hussein's forces from that country, the IRA staged a mortar attack on number 10 Downing Street, the official home and the official meeting place of the British Prime Minister, the equivalent of the United States' White House. The mortar bombs fell harmlessly into the back garden of number 10 Downing Street. No one was killed, no one was injured. Basically, a bunch of turf was dislodged. But nonetheless, the fact that the IRA was able to get close enough to number 10 Downing Street exactly at the moment when the British War Cabinet was meeting to discuss developments in Iraq and Kuwait was nonetheless important. And consequently, the headlines the next morning were not necessarily about the effort to liberate Kuwait, but rather it was about how the IRA nearly killed then Prime Minister John Major. Let me give you one more contemporary example. On Christmas Day 2009, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, dispatched a bomber aboard a Northwest Airlines flight en route from Amsterdam to Detroit. The bomber had concealed in his underpants a new and novel device that had no electrical material at all. It was a plastic explosive bomb that was sort of shaped or contoured to fit his body, that would be detonated by injecting a syringe of sulfuric acid into the explosives compound and hopefully triggering the explosion. Fortunately, tragedy was averted. He put a blanket over his head, which drew some attention from the surrounding passengers. He injected himself with the sulfuric acid. Smoke immediately began to pour out from the blanket. He was pounced upon, the bomber was subdued, and the plane safely landed in Detroit. No one was harmed except for the bomber, who of course was suffering from severe burns. But the point is, even that unsuccessful attack nonetheless reaped for Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula almost unparalleled publicity. It was the first attack directed against the United States that was nearly successful. More than that, it had a profound effect on security, particularly aviation security, and especially on expenditures on security at airports, onboard aircraft, and so on, that was in complete disproportion to the amount of money that was spent on creating that bomb.